the 90th edition of the Fireside Chat, and it's the 90th, and Marcy is 91st because I cannot count apparently. And we can't do any math. I set up the cards and I was like, uh-oh, here we go. But yeah, just going through. Oh yeah, you can see all the lives starting up. There we go. It's always Instagram that takes the extra kick with that one. But now we are officially live on Instagram. And today we have a dynamic duo that is behind the race organization Go Beyond Racing, based in the Pacific Northwest. They do races ranging from smaller runs all the way up to 200 miles with their inaugural Oregon 200 last year. They've made it their mission to create exceptionally scenic and life-changing runs that push participants to test their limits. If you guys don't know, I am reading off a card. I have no way of memorizing hype-up intros, but I can do some pretty good ones. They strongly believe in promoting inclusion and diversity in the sport, and they're among one of the first trail companies to really do that on a regular basis. They also have the Trail Mix Fund. So if you're looking for some amazing events out in the Pacific Northwest, check out Go Beyond Racing. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome the dynamic husband and wife duo, Todd and Renee Jansen.
Hello.
Hi.
How's it going?
Dynamic, all right.
Dynamic duo. I think we were supposed to be wearing like leotards and capes or something for that introduction.
Yeah, I did my, well, one, I can't mask today, and two, because this is episode 90, even though yesterday's was 91. And my hype up intros also apparently, we've just gotten to the point with this chat where we've been doing it for so many years that it's like, oh, we screwed up, it's okay. Whereas like I remember the first time we did it and we went live, it was like, oh my god, we're live, the introvert in me is dying right now. But it just ultimately ends up just being a fun casual conversation, and I can't start this conversation without a food related icebreaker question. So are you ready for our icebreaker?
Always ready for food.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm always ready for food. Pineapple on pizza, yay or nay?
It was good in college, but I'm more of a purist now. So if I'm hungry, it's quite delicious. Yes.
I'll eat it.
It has to have Canadian bacon with it, of course.
Goodness.
Canadian bacon if you have pineapple, or Canadian bacon without pineapple too?
So it's generally wrong to have pineapple on pizza as a general rule. But if you do have pineapple, it has to have Canadian bacon.
Gotcha. I guess I'll be talking to Todd the rest of the night, and you and I will be chatting.
I think that's fair. At least we're a 50-50 split this time, and it's not just pineapple on pizza like yesterday with Marcy. So I wanted to go back a little bit and start with how. So both of you have a background. Renee, you've done running, triathlon. You went to adventure racing. Todd, you were a lead man on one of the biggest adventure racing teams in the U.S. How did that path eventually lead to both of you meeting up and starting this race company called Go Beyond Racing?
I'll let you start.
No,
you start.
You go ahead.
I don't know how it connected us, honestly. I don't know the answer to the last part of that. But I was always kind of fascinated with how events were put together and doing all different kinds of events and seeing how they came together, what the swag was, that sort of thing was always kind of fascinating to me. So that, doing a bunch of different types of events led into wanting to put on races as a race director. My version of how we met, and this all connects because we were running in the same running group in Forest Park in Portland. I distinctly remember meeting her for the first time on a group run, and she has no recollection of that at all.
No memory.
So apparently I made a good impression on her.
Now we started working together on a single race, and then it just grew from that one race to now where we are today.
What was that one race?
At the time, it was called Trail Factor 50K. That's the name of the run club that we we run with on Tuesday nights. We since have renamed it because there was confusion between the club and the race. So now it's called the Stumptown 50K and half marathon. Yeah, we started that in 2012. I think was the first year of that one.
2012, and I had been working. We had a timing company. I started a timing company with some guys that I worked with when I worked at Citibank, and they were IT guys, developers, and we had a chip timing business, and they built a system that integrated social media updates for timing splits. So if you hit half marathon mark or 5K or the finish or whatever, it would update at the time. I think it was text, maybe Twitter and Facebook.
Yeah.
But it was kind of new and one of the only ones like that around that worked. And so we timed a bunch of races and got to the point where we were timing 50 races a year. And then we started the Portland Trail Series, took over Mount Hood 50 and realized that putting on the races was a lot more fun than timing the races. And so that transitioned off, and then we started Go Beyond Racing. But we started working together at that company called Inspire. I say company, it was 4 people.
With the company.
It's a company technically. But that's how we started doing Go Beyond Racing. That's what it grew from.
What made race directing more fun than timing? Was it connecting with the athletes in a more personal manner?
Definitely.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So
timing is stressful too, but I guess race directing is stressful as well. But the stress that came along with doing the timing without the satisfaction, the reward of, connecting with the runner when they finished.
Yeah, that's the magic of race directing, is seeing people accomplish goals and meeting people that way. And there's a lot of work and a lot of stress behind the scenes, but there's a huge reward from it as well. Timing business, you're nervous until the first person finishes and it's correct, and then you can relax. The first person's not correct, you just go into panic mode, and it's terrible. It's terrible. So, but it's definitely different for sure.
For those of you that are just joining us, make sure that if you have questions for Renee or Todd, just type them in whatever platform you're on. We'll see them on the screen and we'll be able to relay those over. Owen, back to you.
Well, I was just going to ask, so how did that, after doing the Stumptown 50K, when did you get to a realization that you wanted to do longer distances and different types of races? Because you have things ranging from, of course, the Mountain Lakes 100, and you have the Bristow. When did you realize that you wanted to up the ante of sorts?
That's a good question. I don't know that there was a moment when we said, hey, you know what, let's just do really long races. Things were kind of growing. This was like 2013, 14, 15, and we were adding more races and coming up with new events. And, the Mountain Lakes 100 kind of grew out of that naturally, just because it was on the PCT in an area where we had a 50 miler. And we go to Lolly Lake. That's where the start and finish is for Mountain Lakes. We go there as a family, go fishing, hang out, and camp. And it was like, this is really a pretty special place. We need to put a race here. We did get to a point, probably starting around 2014, where we couldn't actually go out camping or on a trail without thinking about how we could do a race wherever we were.
Our kids would say, is this a work camping trip or is this for fun?
So he said, yes. So the whole, when did we want to do this kind of race, or when did we want to do that kind of race? It was definitely an evolution, and I can't point to a time when it really started. But
we did want to have hard races. Like back when we were starting, there were a few other ultras around, but not like super hard technical type ultras. And we kind of started out trying to focus on that space with making difficult. In the beginning, people were like, none of your races are easy. They were all hard. And so that's kind of the direction we started off with.
But we also like to think too that a lot of our races are more welcoming and friendly for first time 50K or first time 50 miler, first time 100 miler. So we like that as well. And then the version of how did the Oregon 200 start is definitely different depending on who you ask. I think her idea, she thinks it was my idea.
No, it was not my idea.
So probably shouldn't ask that question.
I drug my feet on that one a long time. I didn't want to. I'm like, I'm so tired after 100 miles. How are we going to do 200 miles? No.
Oh my God. I have seen that after picture of the two of you, and it just, oh man.
We looked way worse than the runners.
Yeah.
Man, and to think that there were only 45 of us this year, but I don't know if that made it more easy or more difficult because we were so spread out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
It probably made it a little easier because we got a little more time in between, with people and being able to connect with them.
Yeah.
Renee, I'll direct this to you first. When you're considering events, regardless of distance, what is it, or what are a few things, if it's not just one thing, that us as athletes need to know about the process that you're going through? Because I think what happens is there ends up being a disconnect between us as athletes registering for events and the entire process that you as race directors go through. And we've talked to a handful of different race directors over our year, 2 years of doing this show. So I'd like to get your insight and thoughts on what it is that you wish we as athletes knew about what you're going through on the other side, so that things happen, right? Deluge happens, pouring rain, and athletes are like, angry at you as if you're controlling the weather. But so what is it that on your end that you wish athletes would, take a moment to be patient and understand the things that you're going through?
Well, it's not as glamorous as they think. It's a lot of work. Like Todd alluded to, we pick places where we like to run or where we go, and as he was saying, like, we can't go anywhere on a new trail without thinking, ooh, this would make a great race location. And that's where the glamour or the I don't know, the kind of not fun stuff stops. But then it's where you get into all the logistics. Is it even allowed? Can you permit there? How many agencies do you have to work with? One of the big issues is always, where are you going to park the cars? And that very often ends up being the deal breaker with places we want to have races, is there's just not giant parking lots. So all those sort of logistics that we start going through our minds, like, where would we, park people's cars? How do we get to the aid stations? Are there roads that crew could drive to get to aid stations, or is it going to have to be no crew? And so there's just a whole bunch of like little details that go into it that I say, if you've ever gotten married and ever planned your own wedding, a lot of people can relate to that. All the details and the things, the photographer, the cake, the flowers, all the things that you're stressing about as the bride or the groom, or the partner, and then nobody else sees that. All they know is that there's a party and there's dancing, and so it's all the little stuff behind the scenes that causes us a lot of anxiety sometimes that nobody knows about.
I think too that I think with any race, or probably any race director, the thing that everybody that participates in the race should think about is that the race director is probably going into that event wanting to put on a great event for the runners. And the runners experience the race director on race day when they're tired and grouchy and haven't slept and, don't have a lot of patience, and they're probably short with you and don't seem like they care. But deep down, everybody's trying to put on an event that all the runners want to enjoy. And that underlies every event usually. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So, and I don't think there are any times that you put on an event where you want to cancel it too. So a lot of times that if a race is canceled for whatever reason, it's
the worst feeling.
It's the worst for the race director.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine, and that actually, since we've talked about it a bit, I'd definitely like to dive into that with the Oregon 200. When I first signed up for that race and saw that race, I think I might be wrong about this. It might have been 2021 when I first saw the race announced. 21, 22, but I know it was a few years before the race actually took off. And I remember being at that opening, that pre-race speech, and I just remember Renee getting totally emotional over the whole journey. And I just like, I mean, a lot of us, I think there were a few teary eyes in the crowd too. I mean, like, you could just tell how much work had been through it. Like, even just like leading up to it 2-3 days before, the day before, like, are we going to cancel this? Are we not going to do this? The fires, this and that. Like, talk about the frustration of like having to cancel that and dealing with that, and finally, and to end it on a positive note, finally getting to that point where like, hey, this race is actually going to happen.
Yeah.
You want me to go? Want me to start?
Go ahead.
Yeah, you know, backing up or whatever year it was that we started to kind of tease it a little bit. We had plans for a certain route, and it was our first time working with that agency, that jurisdiction. And so there's a little bit of a dance every time you work with a new jurisdiction to kind of get and figure out what you can do and how you can do it and the best way to move forward with things. And so we were still trying to figure things out, and then the fire kind of there was a fire in part of the route that we had planned, so we had to replan the route, and you know, still work on permits, and they hadn't had a race like that in that area before, so there was all of that going on. And then when the say this year 2023 race was getting, you know, lined up, then of course there were some fires in Oregon and smoke and that sort of thing. So as you know, even 2 days before the race, we weren't really sure where we were going to start the race. And so it just added to all of the interesting processes that happen before a race, and learning 3 days before that we couldn't use generators and that sort of thing. So, but he was building solar generators for us on the fly and bringing them down. So there was a lot of stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, got to admit though, that rain that happened the night before the race was definitely a blessing.
Yeah, for sure.
That was crazy.
And
I'm telling you, I was at the hotel room and there was a guy there, and he's like, I've been living in this area for like decades and I've never seen a rain like this ever. It had to have been a good omen. I mean, that was wild.
It was absolutely nuts. And you know, the night or 2 nights before, we were calling the school superintendent to see if we could have the pre-race in the school, because we thought we could use their air conditioning and then
to avoid the smoke.
And then there is a company in Oak Ridge called Cogwild that does bike tours, and they're in Bend, Oregon too. We knew one of the owners from doing trail work with them on the section, of course, that got burned coincidentally several years ago. And I called him up and we're like, hey, we need to shuttle people from Oak Ridge to this other place to start. Was it possible? And he's like, when do you need it? And so we were working all that stuff in the background, and it was so nice to see the rain come and the next morning to be pretty clear. It was awesome.
Yeah. As you guys were talking, I had a thought pop into my head about how long does it actually take for you to go from conception of an idea to the race actually starting? Because you talked about permits and different agencies that you have to work with. So when you decide to launch a new event, what's the average time length it takes to actually go from idea to fruition?
It depends a little bit on when you come up with the idea, because most of the, like the Forest Service, the different permitting agencies have a timeline when they will accept permits. And so, for example, a lot of the Forest Service we work with, starting in November is when you can submit your permit.
By November.
I
do the permits.
Yeah, we should talk about this. You should do that. I don't do the permits.
No, but you keep going.
So anyway, depending on when you're allowed to apply to get a permit, and then when you get told yes or no, you know, depending on when that window is and when we first come up with the concept. But for the 200, we started working on that one during the pandemic because we had some free time. We weren't putting on races, and so we, you know, spent a lot of time like driving around the course, or the different course options, running different parts of what would end up being the course, driving around to figure out where we could put aid stations, all that stuff. We had to have all that stuff figured out before you could even apply, before you can even submit. It can take months leading up being able to submit the permit, and then you have to wait till you get the okay. And so
each agency is a little different. There's no like normal, but if you kind of try to normalize it, if you say, okay, in the spring you come up with an idea, you submit the permits, and you submit them by November, and then hopefully by January or February this is thinking about doing something for the first time. They say, yes, we're good to go. Then it might be too late at that point to actually put something up on Ultra Sign Up, because it seems like everybody signs up for stuff a year ahead of time. And so I would say a 2-year window is good for something like in the Forest Service. We moved our Lastest Not Fastest race to a new venue this last year, and we called them up and they said yes. And so that was just like almost instantaneous. We had to submit the permit and everything, but that one was like we were able to do it the same year. So that's the exception. But a year or two probably is pretty normal.
It's interesting. Go ahead, Om.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jason.
No, I was going to say that's interesting because it made me also think about like, if you've ever had to change the route on a race, do you then have to go through a re-permitting concept as well? And is that, is it easier because you've already gotten the first permit?
Yeah, it is easier. And sometimes most places are pretty good about working with you on that, as long as it doesn't go into an area that's not permitted. But yeah, it's usually fairly simple. And if you have a good relationship with the agency, then it's much easier. And some of our permits are 5 years. And so we just submit the date, the number of people, and the basic details every year, but the permit's kind of in place over 5 years. So that makes it much easier.
So I want to talk a bit about the race itself. Doing a 200-mile race, I'm sure there's things that there were expectations of how it was going to go. And then there was kind of the reality of like, you can only understand it once you've gone through directing one. And so talk about that a little bit. How is it different from, besides of course, like having to be up for that many days straight because people are running for like, I don't know, like according to the Oak Ridge newspaper, like 2,000 miles.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, if you guys don't know, they called, what was it, the Oregon 2000 or something?
Yeah.
The Oak Ridge paper. I was like, oh wow, we really are in for the long haul here. Talk about what was similar to your expectations and what surprised you, and how it was more challenging than race directing a 200.
Well, one thing that surprised us off the bat was how quickly people took off. The pace at we didn't expect the pace of the lead to be so fast in the beginning. So there was some scrambling that we were doing to get people to aid stations in time, because Jason Wheat, who led there in the beginning, was going way faster than we had projected. Yeah, that was a little bit of a shock.
Yeah, I think that was the initial like, okay, it's going now. So we had you don't really know what the pace is going to be for sure. You can look at and we looked at all sorts of other races and had all sorts of timetables, and we actually had a physicist analyze some data from Cocodona for us and like did this flow chart and everything. And it didn't really it wasn't right for the first day session. But it then kind of spreads out and then it starts to normalize it halfway through or so. But for me, for the 200, the most surprising thing was how much I enjoyed it. And, we were a day in, we have different roles at the race. My role was to get all the aid stations set up, kind of the logistics side of things. And it was about 27 hours of doing that before it was really comfortable for me to sleep for a little bit. And that was awesome. Just move, get everything set up. Everything was smooth. Volunteers are awesome. Everything was good. And then, a couple hours later, I'm chatting with people and talking to people. I'm like, you know what? This is only race I can like sit here for 10 minutes and talk to somebody and like enjoy it. And looking back on that, that was probably the most enjoyable time I've had at a race, just enjoying, being the race director and putting on the race. It was awesome.
Well, I'm glad that there's a bit of that, because I've always told people that with the difference in the hundreds and 200s, I'm glad some of that like chill out at the aid stations, like have some time to talk vibe kind of spread to the race directors too. It's good to hear.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite things about 200s for sure.
Yeah, the kind of on the what was harder about it was for me was the 8 months leading up to it. Trying to figure out what we needed to buy and buying that and organizing and getting things lined up and how many trucks do we need? When are the trucks going to go down? How much ice? All that sort of stuff. Planning out ham radio and all that for the months leading up was rough for me because we had other races as well. We had a normal workload, and I was kind of whiny at the time before the race, and I'm like, this is like an entire race season on top of the race season, and so when it came off fairly well, it was nice.
Yeah, that went super well. Granted, like I will preface this with the fact that first turn was marked so well. I don't know how a bunch of us went straight. I think Emily Ketty went like 2 miles out and like back or something and still got first female. But
when do you mark that section?
that section was so well marked. I don't know how all of us turned that way. I think it was just herd mentality of just like, I'm getting into my zone. It's just a path, but it was still really funny to think about.
It happens in almost every race. No matter how well things are marked, people.
Were you looking at, like, I imagine you're looking at the trackers and everything. Were you looking at it and you're like, what, already?
Yes.
Yes. I got a call. So we had Starlink set up at some aid station. I can't remember. We were just setting it up, and I got a call from you or from we had someone watching the trackers, 24/7 at the headquarters there in Oak Ridge. And I got a call from somebody like, people are off course. And I'm like, it's only been like a half hour. So yeah, it was, that was funny.
But ultimately, even though I had my moments of getting off the course, I did finish the race. I have the buckle right here.
There you go. Nice.
Yeah. Honestly, one of my favorite buckles ever. Like it was just so cool crossing the finish line and then kind of like being there, dying for an hour, and then like being there for the finish. And oh man, one of the things I love about what you guys do is really like really take it a step above with the DFL thing to the point where there's a DFL award. That guy had so much energy. I still remember being at the ceremony and watching him jump on the stage to get the award.
Yeah, I was so nervous he was going to miss. After running 200 miles and he jumps up onto the stage.
I think we all were. He kind of had I was amazed by how strong he looked. He had a look of like, I couldn't tell if it was confidence or I don't know where I am.
Yeah.
Probably a combination of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was
Todd, you mentioned earlier about the volunteers, and obviously these events don't take place without them. Have you felt, have you noticed any difficulties in getting volunteers at events, and especially at something like a 200, right, where you're talking about 3, 4, 5 days of racing in and of itself, let alone pre and post race?
Yeah, it's we're lucky. I mean, I often tell runners when we start a race that you're going to experience something amazing at this race, and it's the volunteers. I'm not sure exactly why this area has amazing volunteers or why everybody cares so much, but it's a difference between, I think, races in this area and other places. It's getting harder to get volunteers at races just because there are more races, and there are multiple races on the same weekend within 100 miles, and so it's a big drain. And we've made changes to our races where we've gone from 2 days to 1 day. because, we want to kind of pace things out across the year.
Don't want to burn them out.
And the Oregon 200 was it's just so different. And you're like, okay, a long aid station shift for a 50 miler is, 8 hours. That's really long. Whereas this one's 5 days. So how do you, do you do 12-hour shifts or 24-hour shifts, or how do you do it? And, all the volunteers were just like, oh, we'll just do whatever. We'll stay tomorrow too, or whatever. And, same with the ham radio operators. We had gaps in the ham radio operators. And so we had Starlink set up as the, backup communication plan. And we had radio operators. We don't have anybody scheduled for the next 24 hours. I'll do it, kind of thing. So people just jump in and do it. And it's really amazing.
Yeah, being new to the area, I can tell you that you guys are certainly beloved. Your organization is. Marcy Braithwaite was on yesterday, and she saw that we were going to be talking to you today, and she said how much she loved you guys. And I interviewed Mike Morawski about a month ago. He's in Portland, and he's done your events, and I believe he's doing Lastest Not Fastest. Talked about it. Adam Lee commented earlier today from Community Trail Running about, the Trail Mix Fund is awesome. So it's clearly what you guys are doing, your formula for success is working, because to your point, people really love your events and talk about them to us. And having lived in the Southwest for a number of years, I won't say I'd never heard of you guys, but you weren't as popular as Aravaipa is in that section of the country. And so I saw more of them. Now that I moved up here, I see you guys, and it really is a testament to what you're doing with your organization.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a comment actually from Facebook from somebody I interviewed just recently, Barbara Joe Weekly, who said DFL with the heart. Yeah, can't wait to put Barbara's story out on our platform. And we got a comment from community leader Adina saying DFL equals did fucking love it.
Haven't heard that one before. That's great.
That's a good one. So Jason mentioned the Trail Mix Fund, and I wanted to talk a bit about the importance of one of the things that Go Beyond really takes the lead on is inclusion. And I wanted to talk about the importance of inclusion at these events and the Trail Mix Fund a little bit, if you could dive into that.
Sure.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
You're good at this.
So the Trail Mix Fund is a nonprofit that we started. We actually developed it during the pandemic also, as a way to make trail running more accessible to people who can't afford to race, and also for people who think they don't belong in the sport, specifically in the BIPOC and LGBTQ communities.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that's important to remember too is this was not something we came up with. It was something where we had some runners who did our races, and they said, "Hey, I know it's a virtual race, but some people probably can't afford it, so I'd like to pay for 5 or 10 or whatever. Or if there is somebody, let us know." So that's kind of the genesis of that idea. So.
Yeah, it was during the pandemic when we were putting on virtual races, and some people, had lost their jobs and they couldn't even afford a virtual race, and people were reaching out, concerned about us, like they didn't want Go Beyond to go away, and so they wanted to give money to let other people race, and so that's truly where the idea came from. And so we worked on that, developing that and making it available to our races. And the response was fantastic. And so then in this last year and a half, we've expanded it and across the country now. There are 51 races, I think, who are part of the Trail Mix Fund. And what that means is that races that are part of the Trail Mix Fund, people can apply to have the race registration fee waived for any of those races. So we're able to help people from Texas to New York and Indiana and Colorado, California, Oregon, Washington, all around the country now. And growing still, adding more races all the time.
That's incredible. And it's just amazing to see what you're doing in the sport and how that stemmed from just the idea of like, uh, it just started with a few people and it just evolved into something bigger. And I think that's generally how things start. You know, Jason and I talk about it all the time. You stand alone and then you find people who stand with you and you stand together and lift each other up. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
So what is, before we dive into the rapid fire, what does 2024 look like for Go Beyond and the future?
2024. Well, 2024 is exciting. We're doing a lot of the same races we did in 2023. There are a couple that we're not doing. Part of it's because of Oregon not because of. I guess it is because of Oregon 200. We just needed more time to work on that and be present completely during the planning process for that. So a couple of races went away. We're super excited that Last Not Fastest is going to continue in the Columbia River Gorge area. Last year was the first year we did it there, and it was amazing.
That was super fun.
Super fun.
Yeah.
And that was probably my second favorite event of the year. Mountain Lakes. But anyway, there are a lot of second favorites. But so we're just excited to see new people. Every year when we talk to sponsors and partners, we always kind of give a recap of how many runners we had and where runners were from. And there were 700 people that we had at our races that were new to trail running. So we're excited to always see new people. And when we see the registrations come in for races, we're like, don't know that person, don't know that person, don't know that person, know that person. And, you know, it's just amazing to see all the new people coming in. It's great.
I'm also excited about Bristow, or Elijah Bristow, 24-hour, 12-hour, 6-hour race this year. Nick Pham, who has run our events and is an amazing person, is helping make it a big Pride event this year. They had a presence there last year because it's during June, it's during Pride Month this year. And so we're going to have a big Pride presence at Bristow this year, and we're getting a lot of LGBTQ people to race, and I think that one's going to be a really fun race this year.
Shout out to Nick. Just amazing. I think it was Sand Prairie, the first aid station. Yeah, where I saw Nick on both the out and the back. Nick was awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Nick was at the first aid station, and their mother was at the second aid station.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, Ronnie was their mom was
at Sand Prairie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, so cool.
And Nick was at CT Beach. So
yeah.
We do have a
Brian. Oh, sorry. I was just saying Bryna Campbell says, yay, Nick.
Brenna Campbell. I talked to, so Adina O'Neill, who's watching us on Instagram, also asked a question about expanding your race event organization potentially into open water swims or even potentially triathlon, maybe Xterra style triathlons. Any thoughts of doing something like that? Has that ever crossed your mind?
You want me to go?
Go ahead.
Well, we have some friends who put on an open water swim event in outside of Portland, and we would go help.
We
volunteer, do the rescue kayak and that sort of thing. It's not our thing. I can swim, but
I can barely swim.
So that's we like to focus on events that we are passionate about and that we feel some connection with. We've had opportunities to take over events that that other folks didn't want to do any longer, or whatever. But if there's not a connection for us, it's just not what we want to do. So the answer is no, and it's just not quite our thing.
If anything, if we were to ever think about like expanding outside of trail running, it would probably be mountain biking
or adventure racing.
Yeah, because we both have done that, but definitely not swimming. Sorry.
No worries.
And with that, we will move into the rapid fire section, which I will graciously let. Oh, Go ahead.
I just want, before we move on from the Oregon 200, I just wanted to comment that you were the best. You gave me the best hug of anybody at that event.
Oh, no way.
I didn't know you at the time, and we had a great hug, and I'm like, this guy's awesome. So, anyway.
Oh,
Actually-
I appreciate that.
Actually,
And
Adina
I-
did correct me. She said she was asking about the Trail Mix Fund, if the Trail Mix Fund would have other events outside of trail running.
Got it.
That's a different answer.
Yes, got that. Okay. So the quick answer on that is potentially someday, and we get lots of requests for people to expand the scope of what the Trail Mix Fund is doing. And what we say now is we have a specific goal that we're working on, and once we get there on that, then we'll look at expanding it because there's potential to do a lot more than what we're doing now, but we just barely touched the surface of what we're trying to achieve with the Trail Mix Fund, the way we've set it up now.
Awesome.
So there's potential for that.
Oh, I love that. Oh, and by the way, I did see the cover photo that you guys put up of me in the Oregon 200 group. Somebody sent that to me. They're like, "Oh, Miss Always Smiling." I'm like, you probably just caught me the one time I was. trying to. It's one of my goals, along with the dad jokes, which I think a lot of the volunteers got the brunt of.
Well, for our Mountain Lakes 100, we have the Warm Springs aid station is dad jokes and disco. So you need to come run that. And you can trade dad jokes in the middle of the night with those guys.
Oh man, that sounds like my perfect aid station right there. All right, we will take it away, and I'm going to hand it off to Jason to do the rapid fire because food is what he does best.
That's a heck of an introduction. Food is what I do best.
Better
So these
Friday.
we call them rapid fire, but feel free to expand because I'm always fascinated by people's taste buds and their approaches to food. So Todd, I'll start with you first. Oreos. Are you an old school Oreo fan? Double stuff, or what I just learned yesterday from Marcy that there's a mega stuffed version of Oreos. Which do you prefer?
So we have 17-year-old boys, and there are many more versions of Oreos than that.
Yeah.
Just for the record, traditional, standard. I don't normally drink milk, but I would dip them in milk as well.
How about for you, Renee?
I don't eat many Oreos, but I remember in college they came out with fudge covered Oreos, and I loved those back then. Those were good. I don't know if they still make them.
That was in the 60s.
Oh no. Renee, I'll direct this one to you first. Licorice, is it a thumbs up, thumbs down? And if it's a thumbs up, red or black?
Definitely thumbs up, and I love them both. I will eat licorice. I love black licorice. I love that anise flavor. Yeah.
So then are you a Red Vines person or a Twizzlers person?
Twizzlers, I'll eat those, either of those two. I don't know if I know the difference well enough. I mean, I know that there is a difference, but I'll eat them both.
Red Vines, you can actually peel them apart into like, they end up being like the string.
Okay. Yeah, I'd go with Twizzlers then.
Todd, do you have a preference, yes or no, on licorice or red or black?
I'm good. Thumbs up for licorice. Red is more for kids, and black is more like a sophisticated candy. So it's more for older people or like for more formal events. This is my general.
At what age does that happen? In the mid-20s, 30s?
Probably after college, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Like mid-20s.
Todd, what is your take on Peeps? Are they a candy or are they nothing more than dust covered in glitter?
That's just a decoration for Easter. That's the only thing that is. That's the only time you can buy them, I think.
I think they make Peeps for other holidays now. In fact, I would expect there's Valentine's Peeps out there.
So I didn't answer your question, but
No, you did, because they shouldn't stop. They should stop making them. They're not a candy. We've been told multiple times that the best way to enjoy a Peep is stale. And I'm like, so let me get this straight. You're buying something you were professing to like, but you'd rather eat it as it gets older. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So Renee, for you, candy corn, is that a real candy or is it just earwax covered in sugar?
Oh, no, candy corn. I will eat buckets of candy corn
Yeah, that's true.
in October. Yeah, it is definitely a candy.
In October?
Well, yes, I love candy corn. I
In
also
the
love
last, you also love which?
fruit cake. So I'm one of those people that like the weird things.
Are you asking your own questions?
So then do you like panettone, the Italian version of fruitcake?
Yes, not as well as the traditional, but yeah, that's good too.
Really? What is it that you like about the traditional fruitcake over panettone?
It's so dense and just like, I don't know, it's good. It's the perfect trail food because it's highly dense calories, easy to carry. Yeah, fruitcake's underrated for that.
So now I'm thinking of aid station options.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I go the opposite. I like panettone because it's not as dense. It's a softer
It's
cake,
very
but I
light,
also
yeah.
like fruitcake too. So Todd,
Yes.
peanut butter or nut butter if you have allergies, creamy or crunchy?
Well, there are two answers to this depending on the situation. So always creamy at an aid station because you can't, and just like you don't have super nutty, healthy bread at aid stations because they'll choke on it or it'll constantly be in your throat till the next aid station. So it has to be creamy. But just as a personal preference for dining, definitely crunchy.
Okay, so when you're at home, forget about aid stations for a minute. When you're making your PB&J, do you put peanut butter on one side of the bread, jelly on the other, and then smash them together, or PB&J on one side of the bread and then just put it over top?
Two parts of the answer. You can't separate the aid stations and what I eat at home because that peanut butter is always from the aid station.
It's so gross, leftover peanut butter.
It ages fine. And sometimes there's jelly in the peanut butter already.
Or other things.
But anyway,
There is a truth to this because
you put peanut butter on one side, put jelly on the other side, and then you put it together. And then the other question you might add to this next time is diagonal or straight. When you
though that's definitely the follow-up question.
Okay, sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
So my question is, do you cut it into 2 rectangles, 2 triangles, 4 squares, or 4 triangles?
No, you do 4 squares or rectangles, however it ends up. You cut it twice, like perpendicular. That's
it's like PB&J tapas. That's how I look at it. Like I feel fancy when I cut it in 4s.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to circle back to something Barbara just said. Candy corn with salty potato chips was a hit at the Warm Springs aid station.
I think Barbara was thinking of Fritos.
Fritos and corn?
No, Fritos is basically candy corn and potato chips. It's kind of the same thing.
No.
We've also been told that they make ghost peeps at Halloween. So in case you want to ignore peeps at Halloween as well as Easter, just know that they're selling them then too.
I'm sure. I bet every holiday there's probably little trees during Christmas time. If there's not,
it's always one of my favorite things when people are like, I love the Reese's Christmas tree or the Reese's jack-o'-lantern. I'm like, it's the same thing. It hasn't changed. They just put it in a different shape.
Yeah.
Renee, for you, red velvet cake, is it actually a flavor or is it just chocolate cake dressed up for a night on the town?
That's funny because our kids just had a birthday and there was some red velvet cake involved with it. And we had this whole conversation around what is it? I looked up recipes because I wasn't actually sure what was even in it. I don't eat it, so I don't know what it even tastes like.
No.
It's not a flavor. I don't know. I don't know.
It's not a flavor. It's chocolate cake with red food dye.
Yeah.
Yeah, a whole bunch of food coloring. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a marketing
that's it. I love it
strategy.
when people are like, I love red velvet cake. I'm like, so you like chocolate cake? Thanks.
Yeah, I do like chocolate cake.
Me too. What's your favorite kind of cake?
Chocolate.
Straight chocolate, not German chocolate?
No, not German chocolate. Chocolate cherry. I love chocolate cherry. Chocolate peanut butter. Anything chocolate peanut butter, I'll eat. Yeah.
Like a black forest, chocolate cherry, like a black forest.
Yeah, that's good. Yep.
Todd, you made a face like, ooh, I can answer this question. What's your favorite cake?
I don't eat a lot of that sort of thing normally, but a good chocolate mousse is like not like super soft and creamy, but like almost like a cheesecakey kind of thickness of a chocolate mousse. It's delicious.
This is our last question for the rapid fire. So, and I'll direct it to you, Todd, first. You get a batch of brownies. Are you going to be the person who wants the edge because it's got a little bit of crust to it? Or do you want the center because it's got a little bit more gooiness to it?
Okay, so it's the second piece in from the corner because it has one hard side and 3 soft sides.
I love it.
And then a little bit of
Renee, what about you?
I'm just going to eat the whole pan, so it doesn't matter.
I love that even more.
Do you like nuts on your brownies?
no.
What about if you're making it a la mode? What's the flavor of ice cream going on top?
Vanilla.
He's super picky.
That's the only
about that.
option. You can have a little bit of like small pieces of walnuts, but not a lot. It has to be chocolate with there was nut in that. Not like nuts and chocolate. Just a little bit of nuts and then more ice cream than brownie.
So I'm going to encourage you to try this at some point next time you have brownies. Take a brownie, chop it all up, and put it inside a mug, and then put coffee ice cream on top of it. And as the coffee ice cream melts, as you're scooping through, you're going to end up getting like sort of like a mocha type of flavor.
Really good.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Super good.
We told you food is my thing.
Well,
thank you guys both so much. Go ahead, Om.
Can I ask you a question?
Oh yeah.
Are we allowed? I learned last podcast that we could cuss on the podcast. We haven't cussed yet, but I didn't know if we could ask questions.
You can cuss and ask questions. Do both.
So what's your favorite aid station food? Like not like at a 10K, but at like a longer race. What's your favorite aid station food?
For me it has to be like egg wraps with like avocado potatoes. That one's always my favorite for sure. In a 200, 100, it just has to be like a bean roll or something like that.
Oreos. For me, Oreos are without a doubt at every single aid station, regardless of 100 or 200 miler. And later in the day, roasted potatoes are good if I need something warm, right? If it's getting cold at night. But I did Rocky Raccoon a number of years ago, and I couldn't stomach anything. So I basically fueled on approximately 100 Oreos. Like that was the only thing I could eat. And I managed to get through the race. So they were always going to be my savior.
Oh, that's me, but Sour Patch Kids. Like Sour Patch Kids are my savior. By the way, I will say that the pierogies were a massive hit. I love those.
Yeah.
Those were great. Yeah. Pleasant surprise. The yakisoba noodles. I had like 4 bowls of those.
Awesome.
And here's something else. Whenever I mention this, people are always like, oh, gross or whatever. But mashed potatoes with maple syrup, they are saviors because you have that long burning carb in there with the potato, and then you have the quick hitting fuel with the maple syrup simultaneously. And so if you're late at night, like that is amazing.
I don't think I could choke that down.
Oh yeah. Have you ever put broth into your mashed potatoes?
I have done that too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a little different. That's because salty rather than sweet, but yeah.
Right.
Right.
I've done salsa and mashed potatoes before during the middle of a 200, and that actually ended up being quite a hit with some cold Coke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That hit the spot. Now I'm hungry.
Just in time for dinner.
Yeah.
Just in time for dinner. Oh, Todd, Renee, thank you so much for being on our Fireside chat. This is just such a fun conversation. And can't wait to see how 2024 unfolds for Go Beyond. And we'll have to do this again down the line.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us. It was awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great seeing you guys.